degree of difficulty of 10. And Nunes is an absolute magician. He set up for...
Hello and welcome to yet another week of Troy Nunes is an Absolute live stream. Here with you as always, Steve Haller, and joining me is Andy Pregler. How we doing, buddy?
Hey, we're going back to basics. We are rebooting this, going year one style. If you're a comic book fan, it's just going to be Steve and I tonight. And if you're wondering where Christian is, and if you're only tuning into the show because of Christian, which totally understandable, just wait until 9 o'clock when Steve is going to jump on with Steve. Not Steve. Steve is going to jump on with
myself.
Yep, with Christian and John Orsonego, our lacrosse guru over at NunesMagician, to do a live Selection Sunday lacrosse show. It's going to be a interesting time as the women are squarely in the field. The men are probably in the field, but again, as we've detailed on the show many a times, the lacrosse team is anything less than normal and guaranteed this year, so it should be a great time. If you're a lacrosse fan, definitely tune in then. And if you're a fan of every other sport, this is Steve and I got you. And unfortunately, Steve, I think we got to talk lacrosse off the top.
Yeah. We don't know the X's and O's on the field. There's a giant elephant in the room that we do have to address. If anyone was living under a rock this last week, Chase Scanlon, the leading goal scorer at the time for the Syracuse Orange men's lacrosse team, was arrested and jailed earlier this week related to a domestic violence charge. There's not a whole lot known, publicly about what went down. The biggest thing, as we've reported prior, is the team did threaten to walk out after he was erroneously or not erroneously, depending on how it actually worked out, was reinstated to the team. There's some weird things going on in the program. We'll find out later tonight how the seeding in the NCAA tournament goes, but I think the off-the-field stuff needs to have at least a little yarn spun about it at this point.
I think that there's two different ways to look at this, and we're going to start from the very pragmatic sense of this, which is Syracuse did not handle this situation as cleanly as they could have.
Yeah.
Now, where the disconnect and where the mess came from is all hypothetical at this point, as the university has chosen to protect its best interests by not saying anything. So there are many different interpretations of the actions, but what we know happened was that Scanlon was initially suspended for a violation of team rules and the team code of conduct. He was then reinstated, upon which there was the leaked report from Syracuse.com that was Chase Scanlon is involved in some kind of something. And then there was the full report that came out after the case was handed over from DPS to SPD and everything became public record. From there on, we've been operating under as SPD and the district attorney have uncovered evidence and submitted it into the public record. That's when we kind of find out about it, and that's why the story has become so much more publicized, even though this all started several weeks ago. And again, that's because Syracuse, being a private institution, is not subject to FOIA. The district attorney's office is very public, and all that information gets submitted into the public record, and there are people whose job it is at Syracuse.com, at the Post-Standard, to monitor this stuff on a daily basis in order to keep the public informed. That's why we know stuff now that we did not know back then. So, from a very pragmatic standpoint, there are questions around recent Title IX changes related to Betsy DeVos's sweeping changes that took place in the education sector while she was made Secretary of Education under former President Donald Trump. And while those definitely could have played a part in it, we do not know that that is definitively why this case was handled the way it was. It's just a certain theory. That theory, for those who may not 100% know, basically says that there were changes made to how a certain student could get removed from certain activities based on what was happening outside of the classroom. And again, I think from the pragmatic sense, what a lot of people are interpreting and what we are hearing is that Syracuse, in its initial suspension, did not go through with the full process as now laid out under the new Title IX rules. So that is why we suspension, a reinstatement, the incredibly weird John Desko press conference about said reinstatement, and then the subsequent arrest, and after the arrest, the immediate suspension from all university activities. So, did I miss anything, Steve? Did I lay out the factual timeline accurately?
To the best of anyone's knowledge, I believe that is the case. Um, yeah, in all honesty, nobody at this point knows what the hell went down, what happened. All we know is that SU had a weird roundabout instatement, reinstatement, suspension, unsuspension, whatever the hell happened, that probably could have been handled a little smoother. That was probably in a situation where their hands were tied on a couple of things. Um, Overall, it's a very strange situation, and one that I'm sure we'll find more about. But I don't know. This may go down in the pantheon of those Syracuse stories, or stories in general, where we know something happened,
Yes.
and we have no idea what. Um, no matter what, it's not a good look for Scanlon. It's not a great look for. It's not a great look for anybody on any side of it, whether it be the university, how they handled it, whether it be, and this isn't just how they suspended, unsuspended, resuspended, like you were saying, the weird Desco press conference, the handling of it from the outset could have been handled differently. If it happens, like, there's communications people that should handle that. We have a pretty good communication school, I've heard. But whatever. That is what it is. Uh, it's just it's a shit sandwich no matter how you look at it.
And I think that's like the next point that I want to dive into, because I do not think that you can look at this situation and separate rational thought and like the logical timeline that we just laid out and fully remove yourself from the emotions that come with it. In this entire circumstance, the only people who look as if they valued other people more so than anything else were the fellow lacrosse players who said, if you make us practice with Scanlon, we will walk out and will not play.
Yes.
And I think that is incredibly important to underscore. Syracuse specifically is going to get the brunt of this, and rightly so. Either the situation is they did not know the Title IX laws that govern their university, which is a terrible look, or they chose to value a potential lawsuit over their student athletes at Syracuse University, which is also a terrible look. So again, Syracuse has no redemption in this, in a lot of people's opinions, myself included. Now, that being said, I want to applaud these members of the Syracuse men's lacrosse team who took this opportunity and took this shit sandwich, as you so eloquently put it, and used it as an opportunity to, one, come together as a cohesive team and a unit, in the sense of, you are either with us and against us, and we have decided that we are all going to be definitively against having anybody who's involved in this be a part of this team. But secondly, for those who might not be following these players on social media, which is totally fine, I personally sometimes find the issue of following current student athletes on social media a little bit weird. They all took.
I cover the team and I don't.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a weird thing that I try not to dive into. But what I will say is that these lacrosse players took the opportunity to start using this microcosm, or this microscope that was put on them, to talk about a very important issue, which is domestic abuse, specifically males abusing females on college campuses. And I'm going to look it up right now to make sure that I'm right here. But they basically teamed up with a foundation that was started after a Virginia women's lacrosse player was killed by a member of the men's lacrosse team. And the story is incredibly tragic and basically goes that the founder of this organization was in a romantic relationship with the convicted murderer. And so she has taken this opportunity to basically raise awareness on college campuses of abuse, of domestic violence, of how this disproportionately affects women, women of color, and trans and queer women, especially, not just in a college campus, but in general. And the men's lacrosse team all came out with a unified statement. It was all the same statement that they all posted across all their social media platforms, basically saying that they're against they are against domestic violence of any kind, and that they would like everybody to go to this foundation's website to educate themselves about how important this is, and that they are going to be working moving forward with this foundation to provide resources and education on Syracuse's campus. So, through this terrible situation that was not handled well by any of the adults who are paid to manage the situation, I do want to call out the lacrosse team, who, as a group and as a group of students at Syracuse, came together and found a way to not necessarily turn the situation around, but to find a way to move forward in a progressive and in an impactful manner, which is not something that we had seen in previous instances like this at Syracuse or on other college campuses.
Absolutely, and the unified front from the lacrosse team, both in their response to the incident as well as the response on social media, seems to be, one of the things that's coming out of this that is absolutely commendable. That said, as you mentioned, there were hiccups on the administration side. There were hiccups all over the place as to how this could have been handled. I get that sometimes their hands are tied. I get that there's implications. I get that there's reasons that a lot of things are done the way they are, and it doesn't excuse anything. Like I definitely understand how and why SU could be stuck in the weird situation they were. It doesn't excuse how it was handled, but it also, like, knowing that other side is also like, okay, there's a better way they could have done this, but that's how it went down, and here we are, which
Right.
We have to move forward from that, which we 100% will on the field come, I guess tonight at 9 we'll find out, but after lacrosse beat Robert Morris this week, it all but solidified their spot in the tournament. So,
Yeah.
more to come on lacrosse tonight. Now I think, and I don't know if you want to, keep going on this, but we've definitely started with the sad vegetables. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I want to move on from is just like what the men's lacrosse team have pushed with this organization that they've chosen to partner with is the idea that even if a university's hands are tied, they should not be tied in the first place. Like, this is a systematic issue that not just collegiate
Yep.
athletics has to deal with, that a lot of places have in place that allows for these situations to continue. And so, again, I want to commend the players for finding an organization that is not just out there to raise awareness, it is actively working to change the structures in place that
Mm-hmm.
allow this system to continually be perpetuated and handled so poorly. And again, I hope that everybody, if this conversation is triggering, if this conversation is uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but like, it happened at Syracuse. It's happened
Right.
at Syracuse before. But this is the first time that the players and the team have taken upon themselves to say enough is enough. Let's find a way to break down these systems and change things. And I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to the men's lacrosse team for doing something that not any other group of students at Syracuse who've been put in this position have done before.
Absolutely.
And that is, you and I talk about it all the time. Like, we've both had the opportunity to interact with student athletes at Syracuse, and the students that we got to interact with 10, 15 years ago, in your case, like 15 years ago, my case, 10 years ago, like when we
Yeah.
both started like get into this media space, the role of athlete empowerment has changed so much since then.
Yep.
And it's great to see them take this opportunity to say, we have this platform, we have this ability, let's use it for something. And I think that that's, again, we like to talk about Coach Mack and the soccer team all the time. I want to take this moment to transition. We're going to slowly transition out of these sad vegetables. Want to give a shout out to friend of the program, Chris Carlson, over at Syracuse.com. His piece that was about Coach Mack's racial awakening that he wrote, I think it was probably right when we started doing these live shows. It was about a year ago.
Yeah.
That it was nominated for the best sports journalism in the Northeast.
Wow.
It came in the top 5. It did not win. The overall prize went to the writer from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It was another great article, but like, I wanted to call that out. Chris Carlson did a thank you to Coach Mack and to all the people that talked to him in that story. Wanted to highlight that again. It's a great story. We will tweet it after this.
Yeah,
Go
if you
read
can
it.
find it, that was a phenomenal piece by Chris, and it's great to see stuff like that being recognized. And I miss the fact that it was nominated, so that's great to see.
And it goes along again another with this theme of the athletes at Syracuse are taking this opportunity and this that they've been given at Syracuse to not just educate themselves, but to educate those around them that might not know things and have experiences that these student athletes have. So with that, as we continue to talk about the student athlete experience, let's talk about students on the football team. Because Steve, I knew that I was going to poke the bear. I intentionally poked the bear.
Oh, you literally in the Slack said, "I'm gonna poke the bear."
For those that did not read, I said that the quarterback competition is over. Tommy DeVito is the starting quarterback. And the reason that pokes the bear is that there's a lot of people who do not want Tommy DeVito to be the starting quarterback. Steve, I'm going to start with a very basic premise that this entire article is dependent upon, which is the offensive line. And yes, for the 15th, 16th show in a row, we've now brought up the offensive line. But again, the premise is that if the offensive line is even ACC average, I'm not talking about 2018 when the offensive line was in the top half of the conference. I just want league average offensive line play.
Yep.
Tommy DeVito and his quick release, quick down, like they're doing more. Stephen Bailey's piece that he wrote that's behind a paywall at 24/7. I do not want to spoil all that. There are changes coming to the offense.
Yep.
I'll leave it at that. It seems like with a healthy offensive line, if all things are considered equal, a Tommy DeVito type quarterback is better for this offense than a Garrett Schrader type quarterback.
Oh, 100%. And that's this whole system is predicated on someone with a DeVito type arm who can make the right reads, can make the right decisions, and also isn't laying on his back, which is a plus. If you can keep said quarterback vertical, someone like DeVito will be a better quarterback for the system than someone like Schrader every time you look at it. If that is not the case, the legs come into play. We've touched on it, and you touched on it in the article, that Schrader coming in is going to push DeVito. It is it's something that happens so that there can be a competition, and I think Kevin went back and I don't know, did that come out yet?
That came out the day before. That came out the day before I wrote my article. So yeah.
So I was like, I remember him talking about it. I didn't want to spoil it if he hadn't written it, but went back and looked at some of the past quarterback competitions in Syracuse history, and usually they ended up being spots that outside of the Drew Allen thing, I guess at Syracuse, most of the time, the quarterback competitions didn't end up being so they could drive one or the other forward. In the Babers era, however, when DeVito was competent, that made Dungy better. In the current situation with Schrader behind him, DeVito seems to have gotten a little bit of fire under him that is working on a lot of the, like you mentioned, quickening the release, probably making quicker reads, probably looking at checkdowns more instead of standing and shuffling in the pocket awkwardly when the pocket is collapsing. Um, there's enough things that they can do and change, and if the O line is competent, can rectify some of the situations we saw last year. So I wholeheartedly agree with you in your assessment that coming out of spring or even going into spring or wherever, and I've been staunch on this since even Schrader was announced as coming in, that Tommy DeVito will be the starting quarterback in Orange in the fall. I don't know if it's a hot take. I don't think it should be a hot take. He's the incumbent. Dino does that every time. Like, that's Dino's guy. What I would anticipate, and again, something we've talked about, is Schrader came in this year. You have an actual competition next year between him and Lamson, or him and
Yeah.
Morgan,
Morgan.
or Markevich.
Could
If he
be it
gets
could be
back,
all three
yeah,
of them.
it could be a four-way competition coming out of the next year. But this is not the year to do that. And if it is, if nothing else, we Schrader came in, and now we have a competent backup behind Tommy DeVito if something inevitably goes wrong, because it's Syracuse and something will go wrong.
Yeah, I don't think we've had a quarterback start every game. Well, I mean, they might have started every game, but I don't think we've had a quarterback go through an entire year unscathed since Ryan Nassib, because Terrell Hunt was
Yeah.
somebody who was constantly in and out of the lineup,
Yep.
Dudley so, and same with DeVito. So it's not as if Syracuse can be it.
Well, same with DeVito and Culpepper and Morgan and literally anyone who's come after. Like, even the backups can't stay in the lineup. So what are you gonna do there?
Right, and I think it's important to kind of real. I think a lot of fans want what Bama or LSU has, which is like you anoint this one quarterback at the beginning of spring who will be the quarterback who will take you through. That quarterback then moves on either to go pro or graduates, and then you repeat the cycle with a new quarterback. And the reality is that's not the way that it works at most schools. Most schools have a competition or have a quarterback go down at some point in the season. It's football. Injuries happen a lot, especially when you're
Right.
playing at the collegiate level and you have collegiate offensive lines. But in Syracuse's case specifically, DeVito probably gives you the best case to win or the best chance to win. And I think that specific case and that specific sentence is what makes this a hot take. Because, Steve, you've seen it, I've seen it. There are a good number of people who believe that Tommy DeVito does not give Syracuse the best chance to win based off of what he has done to date. And I think what I did not get into in the article, and I think what I want to get into here, is we have the old eye test versus analytics issue right here, where the eye test is going to say he looked good his freshman year when he had a really good offensive line, and he's not looked good since then with a mediocre to bad offensive line. And the analytics say, he's been an inefficient quarterback that still piles up an insane amount of stats behind a very bad offensive line when healthy. So you can't even be eye test or analytics and say like, oh, this is the reason why he's bad. Both sides give you a very mixed message, and people are drawing their own conclusions from these mixed
Yes,
messages.
absolutely. And it's funny that you bring up those two, because if you go back to last year, the first four games, I can distinctly remember people calling out DeVito as, "Oh my God, he's horrible," and Casillo and I in the same sentence saying, wow, he looks a lot better than last year. Like, he's drastically improved. He's doing this, this, and this better. And by the Duke game, it was like he's playing his best game of this. Oh shit, he's hurt.
Yep.
So it's really weird when you have to put the analytics against the eye test, especially when you're looking at modern advanced analytics, because modern advanced analytics tend to agree more with the eye test than um, your traditional numbers. Well, and I guess it depends on the eye that's being tested as well. Um, John Q. Public that's just watching the game probably saw DeVito throw the ball away sometimes he shouldn't have and take some sacks that you wouldn't think he would have. And then when you look at what actually happened, it kind of changes things. So, yeah, it's such a weird, we're just going to go into the every situation in every sport that makes no sense. Um, we're two for two right now, so uh, I don't know. DeVito has talent. He undoubtedly has the ability to be a starting ACC quarterback. He also has the ability to get hurt on the first play because of our offensive line. So to me, it wasn't even like Steven's reporting on what DeVito was doing was great, but to me, it was the fact that we found out that the entire offensive line unit was healthy through camp, and that they made it through without any major injuries. Now, Patrick Davis did get drafted by the Montreal Alouettes. However, that because I don't think prior to that we knew what his status was. Um, it's it's cool to see an offensive lineman drafted even in Canada. So it's he's going home to Montreal and will play professional football, and you can't really discount him on that fact. So yeah.
I think that you brought up a really good point, which is that there are a lot of things that he improved upon, and the offensive line did not necessarily allow that to flourish. And I think you have to look at what Tommy DeVito can do better than any quarterback that we've seen since Ryan Nassib, which is throw an immaculate deep ball, which is throw the ball with an accuracy and a velocity that shows why he was recruited by SEC schools coming out of high school and why he was a 4-star recruit. What I think those people who criticize him want, and what we not necessarily try to rationalize, but can very easily point to why it isn't happening, is they want to see him do the Eric Dungy turn nothing into something. And the difference is that Dungy's nothing was usually a pretty solid pocket and receivers running a full route and nothing being available. So then you get a more traditional broken play where receivers get to freewheel a bit, the pocket has been established, and it gives Dungy a little bit more of a clear path on how to make this into something. With DeVito, there is none of that. The play is broken from the onset, and you want him to turn it into some kind of positive play, when in reality, what happened to Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. When the play gets broken from the get-go, it does not matter if you're the most talented physically gifted quarterback that we've seen in a generation. Yep. You're not going to be able to do shit.
Mm-hmm.
And Tommy DeVito is not Patrick Mahomes.
No, he's not. Yeah, I mean, if Mahomes can't function behind a half-cocked line, then what's someone like DeVito gonna do? And for the record, I still stand by the fact that DeVito is as good a runner as Eric Dungy. He just is a much worse decision maker. I just had to get that in.
Yes.
Because people can't comprehend that they're two different things. But yeah, I don't know. Here we are again.
Talking about it, and
I think about way too much football.
Well, I think before we can move off of the quarterbacks, I do want to say that the legs thing was great. Again, Bailey's piece. Schrader will have to be, to use baseball parlance, he'll have to be an 80 grade elite runner in order to be significantly better than Dungy or than DeVito, because DeVito is already an above average runner. And he
Right.
obviously has the better arm and mechanics that Babers is looking for. So Schrader's one-upping of all of that has to be an elite level leg
Well,
pocket presence.
yeah, and he's also working a year of rust off because he did not play QB at Miss State last year.
Yes,
So
exactly.
it's gonna be an interesting situation coming into the fall camp
Yeah.
because Schrader will have had more time in the system, so he may look a little bit better than he did. But more to come as always.
Well, that's where I wanted to go next. Is that I don't want to plagiarize Bailey's piece, but basically Stephen Bailey went out and talked to coaches on and off the record, talked to players on and off the record, to put together the only comprehensive spring football recap because we weren't allowed to talk to players in the this until the very end.
Right. So
And
so this is our plug to literally go subscribe to Stephen Bailey's stuff because it's really good.
this article is available for $1.
Yeah.
It is the best $1 you will spend on Syracuse football content. Like this is
Yeah.
why we are free, and he is paid behind a paywall. And I don't want to break down the entire thing, but I do want to ask you, Steve. We kind of got into this last week. You've been in a football team, you've been in a collegiate program.
Yeah.
Now that spring ball is over, the football team is not technically practicing together in an official capacity until the fall, which is I think that they can start getting together end of July, beginning of August
Yeah,
is
something around there.
right. So, based off of what you read in Bailey's article and your knowledge of how a program operates between now and that official first date,
Yeah.
like what do you expect to take place within the halls of Manly, and what do you think needs to happen for Syracuse to take that next development step? Because it seems like spring camp was very successful in keeping people healthy
Yeah.
and establishing competitions among various position groups. That's
Yeah.
great. There's a long way to go before they're ready to hit the field.
Yeah. And at this juncture, you're looking at, since there is no, I guess, legit way for them to get together with the coaching staff, um, the strength and conditioning staff ends up being the de facto, I guess, link between they're the off-season coaches. Um, that said, you will see captains practices, you will see Skelly being thrown guys on the field. They won't have the coaches out there, but the captain's reporting back to what's going on. You're going to have a lot of the upperclassmen leading by example. And this team, surprisingly, outside of the secondary and the linebackers, which have experience in the younger classes, and you've got that defensive line to anchor any experience that defense needed. They are a relatively experienced team, not as young as you would think from the record. It's so I think you're going to see some offseason leadership. Um, you will likely see a lot of, I don't want to say bonds formed, but you get the chemistry kind of works out in periods like this as well. So it'll be interesting to see come the fall where people gain and lose. I guarantee they're still having mandatory weight sessions, mandatory or optional coaches practices, or captains practices, and yeah, it's the off season is a funky time, um, with um, the lack of road recruiting at this point. The coaches are all still around Manly all the time, so you are still going to be you're catching film with them all the time. You're up in the office. You're not formally in a film session, but you're watching film in one of the offices. You're hanging around in the complex, so it's a it's almost a more of a, I guess, camaraderie and chemistry building situation as well. So it will have an impact on what we see in the fall.
I think what is the most interesting about this whole thing is that you alluded to it. This team is not as young as we think they are, and that's because a lot of the veterans were hurt last year. So the team on the field that played was very young. That didn't mean that like the seniors all up and left. Like we had our group of defensive backs that got drafted, and then you had pretty much everybody else stayed, and everybody who transferred was in that middle range of like, yes, they're upperclassmen, but like they weren't expected to be leaders of the position groups.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see the dynamic that gets created of young players who saw the field last year pushing veterans on and off the field, and vice versa, how these veterans kind of establish themselves and say, if you want to take my spot, like this is how you have to do it. Like this is the work that you have to put in. It's an interesting dynamic that takes place every year, but I feel like at Syracuse, it's happening at every single position group.
Yeah, that seems about accurate. You look at the roster and it's like, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
We have waxed poetic about football for almost the entire time.
Yeah.
I want to finish out by just saying we are going to, on the site, continue to talk about football, continue to dive into the schedule preview. I think once John's entire schedule preview is out, we will do our official show, like, schedule preview.
Yep.
Because John is doing a lot of the research that you and I would be doing on our own anyway, so we'll just take John's work and use it for ourselves.
Seems right.
Yep. But we are also going to be starting, not necessarily this week, but pretty soon, everybody's favorite Orange biography series will be coming back to the site, and that is always the news to know that football is right around the corner. Get to know your Orange Men will be returning for its, I don't know, 10th season, 15th season. I have no idea.
It was long in the Kelly years that began. Back when he was doing all of them. I can't comprehend that.
I get overwhelmed when like I take on an extra 2 or 3 just because like people have dropped off or whatever. But yeah, doing an entire roster of get to knows seems, and making the jokes. It's really the jokes of them that would burn me out, because it takes me a minute to think of a good movie rec for like one player.
Okay, so I'm not the only one where the entire thing is perfectly fine, and then the movie rec is what takes me like half an hour to look up for every player.
Every time. Every single time. I am on IMDb, like, scrolling like nobody's business.
And I have had some really, really thin connections over the years.
I'm glad that we have just empathized and created this moment here.
Yep.
Great. So that series will be returning. Basketball was relatively quiet this week. Absolutely nothing happened on the men's front that's worth reporting, and I do not mean that sarcastically.
Oh yeah, no, we scratched. We went back through and looked through all of what happened in Nunes this week, and it's like, oh, nothing, except there is one piece of basketball news from the men's side, not in Orange, but a former Orange. Carmelo Anthony has officially cracked the top 10 all-time NBA scoring chart. So, yeah, he's good.
I think that Carmelo Anthony being Syracuse's like representative, a lot of people did not think it was going to be best for the long term because he doesn't have the ring. And Melo in the last like few years has reinvented himself to be the point of, oh yeah, we're not going to love Carmelo Anthony because he won a championship. We're going to love Carmelo Anthony because he's Carmelo Anthony, and he continued to be Carmelo Anthony well into his late 30s and was productive.
Absolutely. Yeah, and
which is a great message to send to any recruit. Like, this guy is in the pros and has been in the pros for 20-some years. Like, do you want that? Cool, come here.
Yeah, come play in the center that he donated. You know, it's fine.
It's casual. He's just gonna come by and drink wine wearing a turtleneck one of these days. Like, you never know.
Best photo shoot ever.
I got a photo. My dad is a big wine guy, and he sent me the Wine Spectator where Carmelo was on the cover. So, like, Carmelo is starting to reach the white suburban dad demographic, which I do not think that anybody was expecting at this point in time in his career. But here we are.
When he was on the up there, the magazine cover that I've got him on, I don't think he was thinking about the wine demographic.
And here we are. Carmelo Anthony, he's grown up so much since he was a Cuse baby.
Yep.
On the women's front, though,
Mm-hmm.
Tiana Mahakahia is playing for the Phoenix Mercury.
We're hoping she continues to do that, but she's making a name for herself at this point.
7 points in the team's first scrimmage, and to warm all of our hearts, she has chosen to wear number 44.
Absolutely.
That is just too perfect.
Yep. So we'll keep you updated on. I think, did Sarah say the 13th they have to report rosters? So
Yep.
by the time you hear us next week, you should or we should know, where she falls, whether she was able to hang on with the Mercury or is probably heading back to Australia. For the women's league, there is actually still a pretty top tier women's league in the world, if I remember right. So no matter what, she'll probably be playing somewhere. We'll keep you updated as to where it is. Hopefully she hangs on with Phoenix, and it looks like she's got an inside track at this point. So here's the hoping.
Yeah, I think it would be great for the program and for her development as well. The Orange, some other news just across the other sports that are being played right now. Men's rowing had another successful week. I don't really understand it, but it's good. So yay, men's rowing. Women's softball knocked off number 11 Clemson at home, which is fantastic. They split the series with Clemson. I do not think that the softball team is going to qualify for the NCAAs because the field is incredibly stacked.
Yeah.
That being said, they have ripped off some amazing wins in what should have been a rebuilding year. So
they've been very you want to see a Peak and Valley team. It's like knock off number 4, lose to nobody. Knock off number 11, lose to one step up from nobody.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It is the men's soccer juju that just kind of invades. But not this year's men's soccer team. Like a few years ago, I remember the men's soccer team had that same level, but it was also because their schedule was just insanely stacked.
Yeah,
and
rough.
I still have that Louisville job to call game stuck in my head. For those who do not follow men's soccer, just know that NCAA men's soccer refs are not quite MLS refs, but they are not too far off from MLS refs.
Yeah, it's hey, whatever. They still play the game. And speaking of MLS, we did, as always, have a couple of guys that played through. Actually, I don't know. I didn't even check to see who's played this weekend already.
Yeah,
I know there were a couple of guys that played today, but oh yeah, it was. That's what it was. It was another Canadian face-off. Vancouver against Montreal. So
oh yes,
the wonderful Ryan Raposo, who's still looking for his first MLS goal against Kamal Miller. So I'm just gonna pull this up because I really want to see if anything ended up. Raposo did end up coming on, and inherently would have been running straight at Kamal Miller, so I kind of have to go back and watch that game now.
Yeah, for those who are wondering on some of the other ones, I've got the New England Nashville game up.
Yep.
Nashville beat New England, shockingly, but it was in Nashville, so you're going to have that. And
Yep.
Tajon Buchanan did get the start for New England Revolution. Obviously did not score anything, but I was reading a lot of the tweets that were coming on. I follow a bunch of MLS people for reasons that I don't understand. But in general, the New England Revolution offense really struggles without its two key midfielders, and those two key midfielders are older and tend to get hurt a lot. So they need to find a way to generate offense. And Tajon Buchanan has been listed as they're playing him at wing back, and it seems to have worked well. Like, he does a really good job going forward and using his speed on the edges, but there's some thought to we might need to utilize him more creatively because he's the only player that has shown any sort of creative spark outside of that core, which is interesting because I think Tajon is somebody who, in his Syracuse career, kind of thrived in that in-between creative role.
Yeah, and to see him to see what they've been doing with him and to see it working seems to be quite interesting. Um, I would have never thought him as a wide midfielder in a Bruce Arena system,
Yeah.
but okay. I mean, let's just keep shifting him back and out wide, and he's just going to be um, Alphonso Davies 2.0. All the
That
Canadians all the
is,
time.
didn't realize that that's like the comp that he's becoming.
Yeah, he's the right-sided Alphonso Davies right now. He's just going to keep working farther back and head to Europe, and Canada will have the best wingbacks that are playing forward in the world.
I find this incredibly fascinating. just in general. The other MLS guy that I like to follow, Miles Robinson, did get the start for Atlanta United. They drew 1-1 against Inter Miami. It feels like Miles Robinson is a firmly entrenched MLS starting center back.
Yeah,
which,
he's basically in pen on the Atlanta roster at this point.
that is, he was a high draft pick, which you hope happens with high draft picks.
Yep.
But he's also, my understanding of it is that Atlanta's three at the back system basically needs him to also be a kind of creative passer in terms of being able to spark a counter, since their entire team is predicated on speed and ruthless attacking up front.
They have been doing that, but they have shifted back to a back four. So he's been playing that right center back that's a little more free form.
Nice.
So yeah, it's been a good run for him. And it was what, a 1-1 draw today.
Yep, 1-1 draw, and I hope that I hope that for those who are U.S. national fans, because I'm sure many people are, the women's team is obviously dominant force. The men is still in an era of flux. Somebody pointed this out to me today, that pretty much everybody, with the exception of Pulisic, from the TNT disaster, are no longer in Greg Berhalter's rotation. They've all been completely phased out. And
yeah, I think Aaron Long might be the only other person that would have been around then. Or maybe Zimmerman. But yeah,
it is. And it's remarkable that they've basically completely flipped the team in that period of time. And so I think that the logical question that some Syracuse fans might have is Miles Robinson getting a real look? And he's gotten some opportunities.
Yep.
And I think he's in that larger group of center backs that if he plays well this MLS season, which it seems to be going so far, he's probably going to be considered because there's not a ton of there's not anybody who's penciled in or who's penned in that position for the U.S. men's national team at this point.
John Brooks, if healthy.
Yeah. Which is why he's never in pen.
So yeah, no, it's Miles is definitely playing well and hopefully keeps it up, and may end up finding himself in Europe at some point. So if he wants to go, rounding out the Orange and the Pros this week would have been Alex Bono, who once again got the start. Toronto did fall 2-0 to Red Bull. I didn't see whether either of the goals were on him, but it's good to see him still holding on to that starting spot. So. Props to all the Orange, and we'll keep you all, up to speed on them.
It's gonna be it's really fun that I think everybody that we mentioned is basically a starter at this point in time for their MLS clubs.
Outside of Raposo, who's been coming on consistently in the 70th minute or so these last couple of weeks. So.
I remember them all being drafted, and there's lots of questions, and it's difficult because MLS drafting is not like any other drafting.
Yep.
But it's kind of been like NFL drafting, where they will pick a guy, and it might take a year or two before they actually start playing consistently. But they've all proven and done really good jobs at getting themselves consistent minutes, and I really do. Tejan's my personal favorite, just because he's, again, the fact that he's doing what he's doing in a Bruce Arena system confuses the fuck out of me, but I absolutely love every second of it.
Why not?
They're all playing really well in their respective roles, and I cannot wait until Q Soccer is back for a full regular season, and I have high hopes that they will. What happened this past year, in a year where the season was broken into two halves and teams were canceling games for reasons that were unclear.
Right. I think, and we can wax on about college soccer for hours, but I think we may see that 2-season thing spark your poke its head up on occasion. Hopefully, I like the move just because it splits things up in a more similar to what they're going to expect at the next level, playing year round type thing. However, with college seasons and that, it is kind of funky. How they split it up would be much more balanced in the future. So we'll see. We'll see where that all ends up. But yeah, it's crazy to think that there's 5 guys consistently playing in MLS at this point.
It is a testament to Coach Mack, and one day he will get on this goddamn show because that is what we are driving towards.
That's how we know we made it. Once we get Mack on,
he is something else. Steve, I do not know if we have anything else to discuss other than the elephant in the room, which is the lacrosse selection show, which is starting in 5 minutes with you, John, and Christian.
Yeah, so I have to close this out and then come back in. Yeah. Other than that, I'd say, yeah, like, subscribe. Yeah, you do it. You've got the experience.
Do I just usually look at Christian and make sure that he's mouthing the right words to me because I think
it's
yeah. Like,
yep, that okay. That
smash the like button, subscribe. Make sure you ring the bell to click the bell so that way you can get notified when we go live, like in the next 5 minutes. Make sure you share this out on your social media if you really liked it, and continue to come back here because we'll be doing this all off season long. Obviously, lacrosse is still in season. There's still plenty to talk about with other sports, but we're getting close to off-season time when Steve and I could potentially be doing Syracuse-themed Dungeons and Dragons. We could. There's somebody's creating a board game called Pockets Barrels Full of Cash, Pockets Duffel Bags Full of Cash. I forget what it is, but it's a college football style board game that sounds interesting, and we're definitely going to play it live once we figure out how to do that setup.
More work for me.
Yeah, I've got some ideas. So we're gonna have a lot of fun on this show in the off season, and we will be back here next Sunday. If you're watching live, if you're not watching live and you're reading this on Monday morning, Monday mornings were always the first thing that leads off NunesMagician Mondays. So thank you for listening. We really appreciate the continued and ongoing support. And go Orange.
Go Orange.